Hi everyone, my name is Frank and welcome to my channel. Today we're comparing the newly released Magic Keyboard against the tried and true Keyboard Folio released since the 2018. Let's begin by going over some of the new features that the Magic Keyboard bring us this year. It floats. Just like that. It has a lot more viewing angle and very flexible to be adjusted. It has a backlit keyboard, now you can use it comfortably at night. It uses the scissor sweep mechanism, which is the same as the 16-inch iPad Pro released this year. It has a trackpad, an actual clickable trackpad. It also has a USB-C port for pass-through charging. This is not for data, this is just for charging. Alright, let's go into the details and see how these two measure against each other. Let's start with the basics. The exterior of both are very similar materials, although I do like the slightly darker color of this year's Magic Keyboard. A very subtle change, but a very welcoming one. You get front and back protection for both covers, and they both utilize the smart connector in the back to connect and use, so you don't really need any complicated setup. Alright, let's start with what I like about each and every one of them. For the Keyboard Folio, it certainly benefits from being a lot lighter, which makes carrying an iPad around all the time a lot easier. The woven material does cover all of the keys, so there's no gap in between the key and the actual keyboard itself. It does offer a little bit more protection against dust, crumbs, or the occasional spill. The next point, one of my favorite aspect of this case, is it actually folds flat. When you open it, the keyboard portion of it, you can go all the way to the back, so you can lay it flat on a table. If you're annotating or taking notes, or if you're switching from typing to writing down notes, that really makes it a lot easier. Of course, I cannot forget to mention, it is the cheaper of the two. And when you're laying it down and using it, your finger is actually closer to the screen, so it is actually easier for your finger to interact with the monitor. Alright, let's talk about the Magic Keyboard. First and foremost, as it is called a keyboard, we cannot ignore the typing experience, right? The good thing with this particular accessory is that Apple actually used the scissor switch mechanism for the keys, which is the same thing as the 16-inch new MacBook Pros that's released this year. The good way about that, it is a lot more durable than the butterfly switches, and it has a decent amount of key travel, which does make typing a much enjoyable event. I am actually okay with the flatter typing experience on the Keyboard Folio, but certainly typing on this keyboard does make it a lot more smoother and a lot more comfortable. And of course, with the backlit keys, you can use it all day long. I know for a lot of people, it is not that necessary a big deal. You may be very proficient already with typing in terms of you don't necessarily have to look at the keys. It certainly is a nice experience when you don't have to tilt the entire screen down just to look for a number key or a side key for an annotation. Next, let's talk about the magic, right? The hinge mechanism that gives it the ability to float. So it does click as it hits a particular angle, and then you can adjust the screen afterwards. I do feel like sometimes I'm just bending this too hard. It might break one day, but let's hope it doesn't happen. And of course, we cannot talk about the Magic Keyboard without talking about the trackpad. It is an actual clickable keyboard versus the haptic feedback keyboard that you have on the newer MacBook. It is small. It is certainly nowhere near the size of the giant giant trackpad that we are used to on the newer MacBook Pros. And because it does have a certain width to it, so the common gestures, multi-finger gestures are okay on here. I do wish it to be a little bit bigger, but you can certainly get used to this. So when I first saw this product, I was wondering the same question: why is it necessary to integrate the trackpad into the keyboard itself? I thought, why couldn't you just use a separate trackpad in addition to your keyboard that you're already using? After using it a while, I did realize it really comes down to how that little subtleties change how your behavior interact with the iPad. For me, a lot of the times when I have a separate trackpad, which I tried before the arrival of the Magic Keyboard, is that I just find it to be a little bit of a hassle, so I ended up not going like 5 inches towards the right of the iPad to reach for that trackpad, and ended up using my finger or the Apple Pencil as an interactive device between typing and using the screen, which is not as efficient as just having the trackpad right there. I did realize that I was able to utilize to a fuller extent the mouse and trackpad integration so well crafted in the new iPad OS that it just becomes so seamless with that trackpad built in. So it really is not a big deal breaker, but that little tiny bit of movement does change how you interact with it. And I see the brilliance of having that trackpad there. So those are the things I like about each of these products. Let's now talk about the things that I still think there's room for improvement. On the Keyboard Folio, there's only 2 angles you can stand your iPad, right? When I was using it, I find myself a lot of the situations, I kind of have to adjust my body to fit the 2 angles that's preset to me. Sometimes I have to put a little something on at the bottom of the iPad just so that I can get to the right angle depending on where I'm sitting at or how I'm looking at the screen. This problem is solved with the adjustable ability with the Magic Keyboard. And that really was it. A lot of people are not so happy with the typing experience on the Keyboard Folio, but I'm actually, like I mentioned, okay with it. And I do really like the fact that having the material cover the entirety of the keyboard did offer it a little bit more protection, especially when you're traveling and there's a lot more opportunities for dust and dirt to get inside the keyboard. For the Magic Keyboard, my biggest problem with it is it does not fold flat. When you're actually switching from typing to annotating, writing, or drawing, the easiest way for you is to actually take it off the case and put it on the table. I do switch between one another quite a bit, especially when I'm in a meeting and I like to take handwritten notes. Now I have to take it off the case, and because I don't want my iPad to be just scratching on the table, I have to close the case and then put it on the case, which becomes kind of a hassle. Unless you're willing to kind of flip it over and use it as an angle, which is kind of strange. And also, it is heavy. Speaking of heaviness, I do see part of the rationale maybe why Apple didn't design a case that could flip over with all these functionalities. Maybe because of how heavy it is, it may not be as enjoyable experience as it could be when you're holding it rather than just taking it off and using it at the device itself. So which one is for you? How do you choose, right? I do see 2 very differently targeted audiences for these 2 products. So it does make sense that Apple is keeping them both in the lineup. When I'm looking at these 2, for the Keyboard Folio itself, it seems to me a typing accessory for the iPad. It does not take the spotlight away from the iPad being still a touch-focused interactive device that you use and occasionally you need to type. But for the Magic Keyboard, it transformed the iPad into more of a sit-down machine where it is more productivity oriented and with a heavy focus on typing and using the trackpad, almost in the direction of a computer, but not quite there yet. If you value portability, or if you switch between typing and those 2 activities very frequently, and you're just using your iPad as an addition to your computer, I would recommend the Keyboard Folio. But if you're using your iPad Pro as an all-in-one machine, and if your work stream contains a lot of typing or multi-window multitasking, I would recommend the Magic Keyboard. They're both very great devices, so choose according to what you need. Hopefully this video has been helpful. Thank you for watching. See you in my next video.